And so war is what the world got after the formation of the Federal Reserve there in America just before Christmas in 1913. And within 6 months we saw the outworking of this plan to bringing in the New World Order with the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand there in Sarajevo in June of 1914, which was the event which started off World War I. And this was all according to a plan that was laid out in the previous century by a man called Albert Pike with the help of 3 other leading Freemasons. Albert Pike was born in 1809 in Boston, studied at Harvard, then later served as Brigadier General in the Confederate Army. After the Civil War he was found guilty of treason and jailed. He was pardoned by fellow Freemason President Andrew Johnson in 1866, with whom he met at the White House the very next day. The only monument to a Confederate general in Washington, D.C. was erected in Pike's honour. Pike was one of the founding fathers and head of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, being the Grand Commander of North American Freemasonry from 1859 to 1891. In 1869 he was the top leader of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and in 1871 wrote the Masonic Handbook, The Morals and Dogma of the Ancient Accepted Rite of Freemasonry. And so Albert Pike's greatest claim to fame would be that as a 33rd degree leading Freemason in America there in Charlottesville, South Carolina, he set up the Palladian Rite with the help of a Jesuit by the name of John Peter de Smet. And Albert Pike liaised with Mazzini in Rome in Italy, where Mussolini came out of from a lodge there in Italy at the time of the Second World War, and likewise Otto von Bismarck, the leader of the Prussian Parliament and also the man who was most responsible for setting up the Second Reich in Germany, the First Reich being the Holy Roman Empire and the Third Reich being Adolf Hitler, who came up out of that lodge in Germany, and also Lord Henry Palmerston, who was a Knight of the Order of the Garter and the leading Freemason in England at the time, was also part of this Palladian Rite. And so he was the Prime Minister of England at the time of the Opium Wars in China, and also was Queen Victoria's Foreign Secretary. And so these are the men that set up this Palladian Rite that took over all the Western lodges from that time on. And we know, for example, that Albert Pike wrote a letter to Giuseppe Mazzini in August of 1871, and this is what he said about 3 world wars. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia, and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the Agentur, that is the agents of the Illuminati, between the British and Germanic empires would be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. And so here we see the outworking of the First World War was in fact the overtaking of the Tsar of Russia, and he was deposed and executed, and communism was established, and Russia became a fortress of atheistic communism. And this was financed by the bankers there in Wall Street. For example, we know that Jacob Schiff boasted on his deathbed that he gave $20 million in gold to the Russian Revolution. And so the Federal Reserve created a Great Depression in the 1930s, which was the very opposite to the thing that it was supposed to do, which was to create economic stability. And so let's turn our attention now back to the plan of the international bankers, which is described in this letter between Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini. The Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed, and so that political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. And of course in 1948 Israel declared independence after they had bombed the King David Hotel. During the Second World War, international communism must be strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would then be restrained and held in check until the time that we would need it for the final social cataclysm. And after the Second World War, of course, communism was made strong enough, and also we know the weaker governments were being taken over. And in 1945, at the Potsdam Conference between Truman, Churchill and Stalin, a large portion of Europe was simply handed over to Russia. And on the other side of the world, the aftermath of the war with Japan helped to sweep the tide of communism into China. And so all the mechanisms are in place today for World War III. And so let's return now to the letter written by Albert Pike to Giuseppe Mazzini and have a look to see what he had to say about World War III. The Third World War must be formatted by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual and economic exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, that is, the origin of savagery and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against a world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment on be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. Illuminati means holder of the light.